I want to give a huge thanks to PTCGO Store for sponsoring the channel. PTCGO Store is a great website where you can get codes for the Pokemon trading card game online at some of the best prices. Of course, now able to order Sword and Shield base set codes. You can use code CHIP5 at checkout to get 5% off your order, or click the link in my description below. Once again, that is code CHIP5 to get 5% off your order. Thanks, PTCGO Store. What's going on, guys? Chip here. Welcome back to another Pokemon TCG video where I am joined by the Collinsville Regional Champion, Justin Bokari. Justin also won the regionals earlier this season in San Diego, so a pretty nuts season on his part. Justin, how's it going, man? How you feeling?
Good. It's kind of crazy, kind of surreal too. Didn't think I'd win 2 regionals this season, let alone 2 out of the last 3. So it's kind of crazy.
A pretty nuts few months for you for sure. So lots of success, Justin. I'll give you a chance if you want to introduce yourself. Just let us know kind of who you are, what you do in the Pokemon community, and kind of how long you've been around.
Okay, sure. So me and my family started playing in 2008. Me, my brother, and my sister. That was our first season. We were all able to get our Worlds invites, which was pretty cool. I started as a senior back then, so I had 2 years in seniors, and we kind of just kept playing. We stuck with it, and then during, I want to say, the 2012, 2013 season, so the year Worlds was in Vancouver, I ended up taking a break, just had other things in life going on. And my sister also ended up quitting at that time, but my brother stuck with it. And then about 3 years later, I came back into the game. I was always still around it because my brother played, and he used to ask me sometimes for advice on decks and stuff. And I came back in about 2016 and been playing ever since.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've been playing at a pretty high level as well, someone who's always trying to compete for that top 16 spot. Leading up to this tournament, it was kind of like a joke amongst friends where it was whenever there's a bubble at the regionals, it's not looking good for Justin. Was there a lot of, you want to talk about that, how often you kind of saw yourself on the outside looking in when it came to top 8 at regional championships?
Yeah, so going into this season, it was kind of like a monkey on my back, sort of oh, I would get so close, but actually never make top 8. And it kind of got in my head a little bit. I was oh, if there was ever a bubble record, oh, it's going to be me, sort of thing, like you mentioned. But I was able to get the monkey off my back, so to speak, in Knoxville. And I felt like there was a little bit of pressure off me. And then from there, it was just, I just relaxed, I guess, every time in day 2. And I just kind of took it by game. But well, before, it was definitely something I thought about before the start of the season, oh, am I ever going to top 8, sort of thing.
Yeah, and you kind of, like you said, got that off your back and have been crushing it this season. Top 4 and then 2 wins is, I mean, honestly, it's every Pokemon player's dream, of course, to win a regional championship. I think that's a very achievable thing for a lot of players, but there's a lot of things that have to go your way in order to make that happen. And to be able to make it happen twice in one season is unreal and doesn't happen very often. So
no, I definitely don't take it for granted. Very appreciative of everything.
No, yeah, and you're very deserving of it, so congrats on your success. So,
thank you.
We are looking here at the Trevenant and Dusknoir lock melodic deck that you used to win the tournament. So, I did do a video on this deck, so if you guys want to check that out, feel free. I kind of explain how it all works, but Justin, do you want to just give us a quick rundown on kind of the general game plan and strategy of this deck?
Okay, sure. So usually in most matches, you want to go second. And then what your game plan is going second is you want to go get a Feebas, Ditto, or Grimer on your board, turn 1, and then Horror House. So then your opponent can't play any cards from their hand the next turn. And then after they usually just draw pass, on your turn 2, what you want to do is evolve the Feebas into Milotic, pop it, so then you get 3 energies from your discard, attach them to Trevenant and Dusknoir, move the Gengar from the active, send up Trevenant and Dusknoir, Ace Trainer, and then usually evolve Muck, and then just use Trevenant and Dusknoir's Night Watch attack to put your opponent at 1 card. So usually turn 2, they have 1 card, they can't use abilities, and the really only live outs is a supporter. And if they don't top deck a supporter on that turn, you usually just put them at 0, and then you just win the game, usually within the next 2 turns after that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can kind of see your the list that you guys prepared for this event was really consistent and geared towards making that combo happen. How often, like, do you have like a general percentage, would you say, that you were able to pull that exact combo off throughout the course of the tournament?
So if I went second, I feel like I got the combo off at least 75% of my games, or somewhere upwards of 75% or 80% of my games. Like,
Yeah.
usually I could expect it to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really, really high percentage where your
Yeah.
opponent's not going to have very much to work with. And more often than not, did you find your opponents, like, were they able to draw out of it, or did you kind of just win by like the third or fourth turn once you got it up?
Usually when I got the lockup, the game was over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so pretty oppressive, but very strong, and I think you guys were definitely prepared for the weekend. So talk to us kind of about the deck building process. I know that this list mostly came from your friend Kenny Britton, so you want to talk about kind of how you guys came to this 60 cards.
Okay, so leading up to the event, Isaiah, Will, and I had gone to Australia the week before, so we really hadn't put that much time into Expanded. So when we all got back, Kenny kind of gave us the rundown and basically gave us a crash course in Expanded, so to speak. And he basically said that he thought Stall and Trevnor were like really just broken decks, and those should be our plays, or we should be able to beat those decks for the weekend. So then when we got to Collinsville on Friday, and when we all met up, we were trying to figure out decks that could either beat those two decks or just play one of those two decks. So initially we tried Turbo Dark, and we thought Turbo Dark had a good shot of beating Trevnor and Stall. But then when we started testing Turbo Dark versus Trevnor, it would win some, but it would also lose some. It didn't feel like, oh, it just outright beat Trevnor, which is like, why are we going to play Turbo Dark if it can't even outright beat Trevnor?
Sure.
And then we kind of scrapped Turbo Dark. And then I think at this point it's like, I want to say 2:30 or 3 a.m. and we're just trying to figure out what to play. And then we just said, oh, why don't we just play Trevnor? So then we all decided to play Trevnor and just tried to make the perfect 60. Then the next hour and a half, we just kind of played Trevnor Mirror to see what techs could be helpful. We tried Wob, we tried Pseudo, we tried other things that didn't seem to work, and we found Wob to be the most beneficial. So then we put the Wob in, and then we said if we're going to play Wob, we have to play 4 float stones. So then we added the 4 float stone, and we kind of just rolled with that. Oh yeah, also we added an egg earlier in the day, because as we were playing the game, there'd just be some games where we would burn too many resources with Ultra Ball or Quick Ball, and then like you would just burn VS Seekers unnecessarily. And then we just said, what if we just put in an egg? Like, you don't need to use it past turn 1, so like once you get muck out, it's not a big deal. We just want to save resources turn 1, and the egg proved to be super clutch throughout the weekend for all of us, and I'm glad we put it in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we kind of got to follow your journey through top 8 on the official stream, and we just really saw how powerful egg was in like all of your games. Like, you used it, like it was always the first. Of course, whenever you play it, it's always the first thing you get rid of with compressor, but it just really like proved to be like do just that, let you save resources where you could use setup but keep a like quick ball or something in your hand, so like after the setup you still had more draw to move through your deck. Okay.
Oh, also another thing,
Sure.
our list played Garb. That's something that Kenny had brought up to us. He thought that Garb would be a good inclusion because if decks tried to just go, like if other decks tried to play Wob against you and then they just wanted to stall time until they could set up like an Artillery or Cincino, for example, we could still shut those off once we got Garb. So that's one of the reasons we played Garb, is if people tried to set up stage 1 evolutions versus us, we could still shut them down and get the lock, and Garb proved to be very clutch throughout the weekend. Not only against those stage 1 things, but against Egrau in the finals, it was very useful.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also kind of acts as like a second out to get the
Yes,
ability lock on the next turn. So I could definitely see how it was really good for that as well. So let me ask you about a couple of cards that kind of made their way out of the list. So obviously I would imagine that you guys kind of based the start of the tournament, or the start of this list, on Pablo Mesa's top 8 list from Dallas. And a couple of cards that he played that are absent here would be Field Blower and Counter Catcher. And we saw your opponent in top 4 played both of those cards, but something that you guys tried or decided not to go with. Do you want to talk about why those cards didn't seem worthwhile for the tournament?
Okay, yeah. So I'll start with the Counter Catcher. The Counter Catcher originally was in there, but as we kept playing more games, we found that it was very hard to find it when you actually wanted to use it. And then there were just some games where you had to throw it away. So we felt like you weren't even getting that much value out of the card. And then we decided that we needed to fit some of these other techs, and it was kind of like our first drop, and none of us missed that card. So
Sure.
I think that dropping Counter Catcher was okay. But the Field Blower is like our 61st card. I think if we had
Got
to
it.
play the tournament again, we would all try to put the Field Blower back in. It's just so helpful against decks that play Stealthy Hood. So like if they Stealthy Hood their Ranguru, for example, we can't remove the hood. So then the only way we can get rid of it is just by Guzma knocking it out. And if we Guzma, then we're not playing Ace Trainer or End to get the lock, right? So that's definitely something we would like to add. Field Blow is also good that if you Garb block, you could also Field Blow your own Garb and then use a Melodic again and then re-Garb. So if we had to play the tournament again, I think we would probably drop either the 4th Compressor or the Mallow Lana for a Field Blower. And then I think the deck would have been almost perfect, I guess, so to speak.
Sure. And then another card, I think I see like a lot of people kind of question this inclusion, and it's something that you just mentioned. Do you want to talk about the Mallow and Lana, why it's in the list, and what its like specific uses are?
Okay, so the Mallow and Lana is just good for any deck that tried to two-shot your Trevenant and Dusknoir. So, for example, against Turbo Dark, if they could get like a Darkrai GX, and you have a weakness policy Trevnor, and if they could, a Darkrai, Greninja Zoroark, for example, the better example. Sure. If they get a Greninja Zoroark and you have a Trevenant and Dusknoir with a weakness policy, they could potentially two-shot your Trevenant and Dusknoir. But if you go Malolana, you could just Malolana, and then they have to 3-shot while you 2-shot their Greninja Zoroark. So they basically wipe their attacker, so that even though they have no hand, they can still attack you, but they won't one-shot your Trevenant and Dusknoir, so then you can one-shot their Greninja Zoroark and then get rid of their attacker, and then they have no hand, and then you just keep the lock going. And that basically works for any deck that tries to two-shot your Trevenant and Dusknoir. So a lot of decks can't one-shot Trevenant and Dusknoir, which is one of the big pluses for the deck.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, I think that's kind of a good rundown of the deck and of leading up to the tournament. So morning of, obviously, you said you guys were up pretty late figuring out the list, so I'm sure you're pretty tired heading into the venue, heading into the tournament. Kind of what's going through your mind as you're preparing to sit down for round one? Do you find yourself ever like getting nervous before these tournaments, or do you feel pretty prepared?
I wouldn't say nervous, but you definitely feel anxious before the first round. It's like, I feel like anybody before the start of a tournament, you're not sure how it's going to go, but as soon as that round one starts and you're like in game, I feel like that passes. But normal tournament jitters round one, but I felt confident in our deck, and I like that how our deck had a chance to beat anything no matter what we sat down against, which is one of the benefits and pluses. We thought that no matter what we sat down against, we felt like we could win, because as long as we get the lockup, we can usually beat anything.
Sure. Okay, well, let us know if you want to give us kind of a breakdown of how day one of the tournament went. How did it go for you, those 9 rounds?
Okay, sure. So round one, hit Mewtwo. Pretty standard. Game one, I got the lockup. Game two, I kind of had a slow start, but was able to get the lock, but not the full lock because I couldn't get Muck. So then he was able to still attack with Mewtwo and set up. And then I ended up stumbling a bit. He ended up coming back and then winning that game. And then game three, I just got the hard lock and won. Round two, I played against Mew counterbox deck with Zebstrika, Oranguru, and Hood. So I'm just sitting there like, wow, they have all these locks, all these keys to my lock, so to speak. And then I'm trying to remember what happened in the first 2 turns, but all I remember was he set up Zebstrika and Oranguru with Hood on turn 2, and I'm just sitting there like, oh my goodness, how am I going to win this game? But I somehow managed to get it close, and then at the end of the game, I'm in a favorable position where he ends me, and if I hit Guzma, I win the game. I have a 4-card deck, so I'm seeing 2 cards. It's an end to 1, and I miss the Guzma, and then he ends up winning the next turn. And then we were only able to finish 1 game, so he ended up winning that one. And then in round 3, I play against Grant Manley playing his Florist All-Star deck. I thought this matchup was okay as long as I could get the lockup. So game 1, he goes first. Game 2, I think I draw about 40 cards. I use all 4 of my Shamans, Juniper, Dedenne, and I basically have everything except a Float Stone. I forgot what I started, but I needed a Float Stone, and I missed my Float Stone out of like 15 cards. And Grant even said like, wow, you missed the Float Stone there, huh? And I was like, yep. And then the game kind of played out from there. And then there was one turn where he played Handiwork and hit double Via Seeker, and then the game was just over after that. And then game 2, I was able to get the lock. And then game 3, we just didn't have time to finish. And then the next 2 rounds, I think it was against Mewtwo. It was pretty standard, got the lock. Not much to say about that. And then against round 5, I played against the Zacian, where I won game 1 because I got the lock. He won game 2, and then game 3 was pretty close. I ended up getting the lock, but he played a Bronzong, which made things a little bit more difficult because I had to get Garbodor to make it like a true lock. Otherwise, he would just keep getting Zacians powered up. So I had to get the Garb, and I think there was one turn where I do a Pale Moon play because I didn't Horror House this game, and I just stripped him of energies, and then he wasn't able to set up another guy, and then I was able to knock out 2 Pokemon in one turn, so to speak, the Pale Moon turn, and then I just went Guzma the next turn. So I was able to win that game because of that. Nice. And then round 6, I played against a Zoroark. I was a little bit surprised to see that.
Interesting,
yeah. He was so games 1 and game 2 kind of went pretty similar. I got slow starts, and he was able to set up pretty well for the most part with his ball engine. He played quick ball, 4 ultra ball, I think, and maybe a couple nest balls for when I remember. But he was able to get pseudo turn 1 and set up for the most part. Usually pseudo isn't a problem, but both these games, my starts were awkward. If you start a Shaman and they have pseudo, then it's really rough because then you can only effectively play like one Shaman, right? Because you need a Shaman, a bench space for Feebas, a bench space for Grimer/Garb, and then a bench space for Trevenant and Dusknoir, right? As long as you start like Gengar or Feebas or Trevenant and Dusknoir, it's okay because then you can still use 2 Shaman.
Yeah.
But in both of those games, I started a Shaman, and then I started a Trevenant and Dusknoir, which is also a really bad starter against Zoroark because you usually have to use a Float Stone to move the Trevenant and Dusknoir, and then you're not attaching weakness policy to it. So my starts were kind of awkward those 2 games, and then he was able to win pretty handily. So at that point, 3-2-1, not sure how to feel, but I was like, all right, let's see if we can rebound. And then I was able to win the next 3 rounds. Actually, they were pretty close for the most part. I think round 7 was Night March. I just got the lockup, and there was really not much he could do. And then round 8 was the really close game I had day 1. I was playing against an Ultra Necrozma ADP.
Okay.
And then game 1, we played 2 games. Yeah, game 1, I went first, just tried to set up. He started ADP, got the turn 1 GX. And from there, I'm a little bit nervous because any deck that plays ADP, and if they can get the turn 1 GX, it's very hard because you can only effectively use 1 Milotic. Because if you use 2 Milotic, they can just knock out Tag Team, and then they take 4 prizes and win, right? So from there, I had to be very careful about how I use my Milotics and how I basically give him prizes, so to speak. So the game kept playing out, and then there was one point in the game where I had to use the second Milotic. Just because my hand and my board was kind of weak. So I used the second Milotic. He's at 4 prizes. And then I use Trevenant and Dusknoir to put his hand to 0. He ends up top decking out of it. Not a supporter, but just a way to attack, and he attacks me. I think with a Noivern, not an Ultra. So I can't knock out this Noivern. And if he attacks me at Noivern again, I lose. So what I end up doing is I end up float stoning my I end up moving the Trevenant and Dusknoir somehow. I think it was either Floatstone or Guzma, and I end up Tapu curing both Trevenant and Dusknoirs.
Oh, okay.
So that, because I hadn't used my GX attack that game, so that it would buy me more time to take all my prizes. And then he ended up not top decking that turn, and I was able to retreat the Lele, knock out his Noivern, go down to 2 prizes, and then he top decked something to attack, and then he attacked my Trevenant and Dusknoir, but since I healed, he couldn't knock it out, and then I was able to just use that Trevenant and Dusknoir to take my last prize. So the Tapu Cure definitely came in clutch. So I ended up using, I think, all 3 GX attacks I have this tournament, or that nice. I can use.
Yeah.
And then round 9, I played against ADP Blounds, which is another tough matchup for the same reason I mentioned in round 8. If they can get an ADP GX attack and then just get an energy off the 1 card after you get the combo, then they can kind of basically set up board. Another way you can beat Trevenant and Dusknoir is if you can just play from your board, right? So if you can just have all your energies on board with like the ADP Blondes deck, there's really not much the Trevenant and Dusknoir deck can do because they can't really disrupt your board. They just disrupt the hand. Yeah. So whatever deck can set up board usually has a good matchup versus this deck. And he wasn't able to do that games 1 and game 3. Game 1 and 3, I was able to get the lockup, and he missed a turn. After he got the turn 1 GX, he didn't get the turn 2 ultimate ray, so he couldn't set up his board. And I was able to win those games. And game 2, he just got the turn 1 GX and set up his board. But the other 2 games, I got the lock, and I was able to go 6-1.
Nice. Yeah. So coming into day 2 at 6-2-1 is always kind of like a scary spot where
Yeah.
your day 2 has to be really, really good in order to make it into top 8. Like there have been plenty of times where someone goes 4-0-1 in day 2, but they came in at 6-0-1 and then they end up bubbling out of top 8. Are those the type of things that are going through your mind at that point, or are you just kind of happy that you were able to get in there?
No, I definitely was thinking like, well, I have to be basically perfect
Yeah.
tomorrow. Like, and even if I am, like, don't lose a game, then I could still bubble. Like in Atlantic City, I was 3-0-2, but I didn't even lose a game. So I think I won 6-0, and then I double ID, and then I got ninth. So that was
Yeah.
definitely in my mind. So I was like, all right, we'll just play tomorrow, see what happens, and hope for the best.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, spoiler alert, it ended up working out fine for you.
Yeah.
But why don't you run us through what day 2 looked like?
Okay, so round one, I hit an egg rail. Usually this matchup is fine as long as you don't prize a Garb or Ditto. But I ended up prizing the Ditto game one, and I tried to take a different strategy where I just tried to take aggressive prizes to try to get the Ditto. I did not and managed to get the Ditto, and then he ended up getting the basic locking plume, and I wasn't able to set up Muck because if you prize Ditto, then the strategy is you have to attack with Muck. But I wasn't able to set up the Muck before he was able to take his 6 prizes. So he won game 1. Game 2, he went Lele Pass, and I just went Horror House into Poltergeist Knockout.
Yeah.
And then game 3, we just didn't have enough time to finish. I started off round 1 with a tie, and I was like, wow, okay, this is going to be really hard. I have to go 4-0 from here. So then the next round, I hit Night March. This Night March was playing a 1-1 Silvally, so it was a little bit different, but our list had Garb, which made things a lot easier. So I could
Like
still
the
get the
Silvally
lock.
that draws them to 5?
Yeah, draws them to 5.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think that was his Trevnor counter, but I don't think he expected Garb and Trevnor. So I was able to set up the Garb and basically lock him the 2 games. Next round, I hit Mewtwo. Game 1, I end up having. He ends up distorting me. I go first. He distorts me turn 1, and then turn 2, my hand is kind of awkward, so I end up having to make a play where I go Horror House and counter his Stadium, so he has to draw pass, and then turn 3 at this point, I couldn't get the lock, so I just attach N him, and then basically just say he has to get 3 items, and he got 3 items, and I Poltergeist, and then from there, he kind of stumbled, and then I was able to get the lock after that. And then game 2 was a really close game. It comes to a point where I could tell he's setting up my board to use the Alolan Sand Slash, and then it comes to a point where he plays Dimension Valley, and so as long as I get rid of Shaman, he can't win the game. So I got rid of Shaman, and then he used Alolan Sand Slash, and then to take 4 prizes. He hadn't shown me the Alolan Sand Slash, so I wasn't sure if he didn't think I knew he had it or not, but I just got rid of the Shaman just in case, and thankfully I did, and because he did play it and I would have lost, that would not have been good. So from there, he went down to 2 prizes. I popped him my Lodic, attached them to Trevnor, end him, and then attacked. He didn't draw out of it that turn, then I just attacked with Trevnor again. I was able to knock out 2 Mewtwo's back-to-back. We won that one. And then round 4 of day 2, I hit a mirror. This mirror was not prepared for the Tex. He chose to go second. Game 1, I was able to get Wob up, and he kind of just drew past from there. And then game 2, I was able to get the Garb plus Trevnor lock, and he couldn't do much from there. So our list was very good against Mirror, and was able to beat a couple of those day 2. So that was a good win round 4. And then round 5, I hit a Doll Stall, where basically I just got the lock turn 2 both games, and he did not draw out of it.
Simple enough, straightforward. Got yourself into the top 8, and you mentioned how you had to play yourself a few Trevnors in day 2, beating that one in Swiss. Now you find yourself up against your friend Will Jenkins in top 8. Now this game was streamed, so if you guys want to check it out, it should be over on the official Pokemon YouTube channel. But yeah, tell me kind of, I mean, obviously Will's a buddy of yours. He went 8-0 or 8-1 on day 1, so he obviously found a lot of success through the tournament as well. What's kind of going through your mind having to play him in top 8?
Honestly, I wasn't too happy about it. I was not too happy about playing a friend in top 8. I'm glad we both made top 8, but I was hoping that if we did play, it would be in the finals. But We had to play, and I thought whoever won our match would have a good shot to win the tournament. So no matter what happened, I would have been happy with the outcome. So I just went in saying whatever happens, happens, and no matter who wins, I'd be happy with it.
That's a great mentality to have, especially amongst friends. But yeah, why don't you just kind of, like I said, this game was streamed, so you guys can check it out for yourselves. But oh yeah, and I guess I should mention before we go into this, there was kind of like a discussion about how to play the mirror amongst you guys, about like what's the optimal strategy. What kind of was your thoughts initially, and kind of after you've played it so many times through cut, what are your thoughts?
Okay, so initially, I think that if your opponent doesn't play Wob and you play Wob, you should always choose to go second still, because that way you can get the combo Horror House into Trevnor turn 2. But if both people play Wob, then I think that you should always go first, because I think the Wob is just too good to shut down your opponent going second.
Okay.
So that's what I would say. If both people play Wob, then you should go first and try to get Wob. But if your opponent doesn't play Wob and you play Wob, you still go second, because the deck is strongest when it goes second still.
For sure. Okay, and well, we did see in top 8, whenever you went first, getting that Wobbuffet was really, really key in your games against Will.
Yeah, so then game 1, I ended up getting pretty lucky. I started the Wob,
Yeah.
and Will ended up going first. So the Wob really shut him down, but he was able to get the Wob active. And then from there, the game got really awkward for me. I felt like Will was in a really great spot the whole entire game. And then there came a pivotal turn where he had just attacked my Trevnor. So I went Malolana, heal my Trevnor, retreat back into it, attach. So I have 2 options here. I could either Night Watch his 3-card hand, right, and then do 150 to him, and then try to put him at a low hand size, or I could Pale Moon. And I ended up Pale Mooning. The reason I used Pale Moon is because I prized my Rescue Stretcher. So if I had used Night Watch, and both my Melodics are in the discard, so if I had used Night Watch against Will, all he had to do was go Pale Moon versus my Trevnor, and I lose the game instantly. So I basically just had to take a risk that his 3-card hand was bad, and then I just went Pale Moon, and if he couldn't move it, then I win the next turn. And thankfully, his hand wasn't great, and then he wasn't able to move the Trevnor, and I just won the next turn. If he was able to move the Trevnor, I'm pretty confident Will would have won that game, but he was not. So.
Yeah, if I remember right, his hand was like it was like double Skyfield and then like other unplayable cards, so he just like really had no options.
Yeah, which I was kind of surprised about, but he had played a decent amount of resources, but it was a risk no matter what.
Sure,
So whatever
sure.
happens.
Sometimes it's like, I think that's kind of one of the things that separates like pretty good players from really good players, is being able to say like, I'm probably
Calculated
going to
risk.
yeah, exactly, I'm probably going to lose this game if I don't take this risk, and you kind of identified that, and it ended up working out. And obviously, like, maybe if you don't go for that risky play, you don't end up winning the tournament, so
Yeah, true. All right, so then that's how game 1 went.
Yep.
And then game 2, Will got a lackluster turn 1. I think he ended up prizing Wob 2, and then I was just able to get the lock, turn 1 Horror House into turn 2 Trevnor with Muck, and then he drew pass, unfortunately. Kind of sucks that game 2 went that way, but that's what the deck does. So I was just able to get the full lock and won top 8 that way.
there you go. And moving on to top 4, you're playing against Trevenant and Dusknor again. This time, your opponent is not playing the same 60. He doesn't have Wobbuffet, he doesn't have Garbodor or Execute, any of those things. But in turn, he does have things like Field Blower and Counter Catcher. What were kind of your thoughts going into that top 4 match, knowing that his list was probably a little bit more standard?
So going into the match, I thought I was slightly favored because of the text that you mentioned.
Yep.
So I was just like, as long as I can draw well, it should be okay. So game 1, he won the flip, chose to go second, and I just got the Wob, basically set up my board for turn 2, and then he kind of just drew pass, and I was able to get the lock. Really not much to say there. And then game 2 is like the pretty crazy game. Actually, game 2 and game 3 are pretty crazy, but game 2, and he ends up he chose to go first, which I think he chose to go first because of my Wob, but I still think you should go second. But he chose to go first. I go second, get the lock, and then from there, he's basically on top deck mode. And then I think he top decked 3 or 4 times out of it. But
It was
he
a
was able
lot,
to
yeah.
top deck. Yeah, he was able to top deck out of it.
And I think his list playing things like Trainer's Mail definitely helped him
It
there.
definitely helped. Yeah.
And maybe it's like a thing where he knew that you had the counters. And I think he went out of his way on turn 1 in the second game when he chose to go first to like compressor away a Juniper so that all of his VS Seekers were
More live.
live
True.
top deck out.
Yeah.
So maybe that was kind of what his thought process was, is like, I don't have, my list isn't as prepared for this as his is. I have to get a little lucky anyway.
True.
So I'm going to try to make as many of my thin my
Out,
deck as much
yeah,
as possible,
as much
and
as possible, yeah.
and give myself as many live outs. So
yeah, true. I personally thought Lucas played really well throughout the set, like
Sure,
aside
sure.
from the last turn, game 3, and I'll get to that in a sec. But I think that I thought people were blowing that way out of proportion the last turn in game 3, how it was all over like Twitter and stuff. I feel like people make mistakes all the time, and I think that was blown a little bit out of proportion. I thought Lucas played really well throughout the whole set, and he definitely made it difficult on me, even though, like you said, our list had advantage in the mirror. It was definitely not easy, and he definitely made it difficult on me throughout the whole set. So I thought, like, and anybody can make mistakes, right? It happens to everybody who plays this game long enough. I thought that the game 3 horror house thing was blown a little bit out of proportion, and I think that could have happened to anybody, not just Lucas. So I just wanted to say that I thought he played really well, and that that could happen to anybody. So not to get too discouraged about that.
Yeah,
but anyway, game 2, he was able to top deck out of it, and then he ended up playing to his outs, right, as we were talking about, and he played to his outs into the counter catcher. Knock out my Shaman with Trevnor on the last turn. I think that was the only turn he could have done it. I don't think he could have top decked anything else that turn, from what I remember.
Yeah,
so I think he had to hit it that turn.
Yeah, he had to get sick of it. Was like you were going to win the game on the next turn. You were down to just one prize, I think. So,
okay.
And I think you had an opportunity to win the game the turn previous, but I think you were either out or just didn't have.
So I had one VS Seeker left. I knew I had one VS Seeker left.
But you just didn't have it that turn to win the game.
Yeah.
And that ended up turning on his counter catcher so that he could, get the knock. I mean, that was also because you had to end him. So you end him like VS Seeker for end the 2 turns previous.
Yeah, 2 turns, yeah.
Because he had 2 prizes. So it's like you're ending him to 2 and getting rid of both of his cards. It was like the perfect scenario. He was just able to draw out of it. So,
yeah. But so then he won game 2, and I was so after I lost game 2, I was kind of shocked, and I think it kind of made me go on tilt, so to speak, a little bit, and I think I did not play game 3 as well as I could have. So if I go back and forth, now I can remember, he goes first. I don't think he gets a Feebas down, and then turn 2, I get the horror house, and he goes passes, and what I could have done was not. I think I evolved Garb game 2 from what I can remember. I haven't gone back to watch the whole thing yet, but from what I can remember, I evolved Garb, and there was no reason for me to evolve Garb looking back because he didn't even have Feebas in play. So I evolved Garb, and then I played Ace Trainer, and I think I missed an energy. And if I did not evolve Garb, I could have had more outs because I'm pretty sure I had 1 Shaman left, and I knew it was in deck. And I'm pretty sure I drew an Ultra Ball off my Ace Trainer. So if I didn't evolve Garb, I could have Ultra Balled for the Shaman to draw more cards to try to hit the energy to try to start the lock going from that turn. But I basically gave him another turn because I missed a turn of attacking. And I think I just played way too aggressive that game, and I made some plays that I probably should have, and I probably let game 2 get to me too much. But thankfully it didn't end up backfiring. But that's definitely something that can happen to anybody, right? You're on stream and you lose a game like that, and it can get to you a little bit, but you just try not to let those emotions get to you, so to speak. But I definitely think I let it get to me game 3, and it almost cost me the game, but thankfully it didn't.
Yeah, those things definitely, like you said, can just happen to anyone. It's really easy for people to point out mistakes whenever they're not the one on stage, they're not the one playing for, all the CP, all the money that's on the line. So definitely, I don't think anyone can really blame you for not playing 100% perfectly. And like you said, it ended up working out. So
yeah, because I missed a lock, and then the game got really weird. It got to a point where he ended up using Gengar, and then he poltergeisted my Trevnor twice. And then he ended up knocking it out. And then the reason I didn't use Malolana to heal the Trevnor so he couldn't knock it out with Poltergeist, because if I used Malolana, he could have Horror House decked me out. So I knew that I couldn't do that. So I basically just had to sack the Trevnor and then just hope he took enough items where I could knock it out off prizes. But Lucas was really smart. When he got his trainer's mail into VS Seeker, he went Malolana to basically take away that win condition from me the turn before. So when he did that, I basically, my only hope was I sent up Garb and with Floatstone, and I had Gengar on the bench, and I basically just was hoping he would knock it out, and he had taken 3 items from his prizes, like unplayable items, and then if I was just hoping he would have 5 items like after I sent up my Gengar. But what ended up happening was he used Horror House, and then I was able to retreat my Garb into Gengar, and then use Poltergeist to take the knockout on his Gengar. And he had used the Malolana. He discarded double Milotic.
Yep.
So I don't think even though he had Field Blower, I don't think he played Stretcher from what I saw the whole series. So I don't think he had a way to recur his energies back. So at that point, the game was over.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like you said, that definitely was a moment where people were kind of pointing at, saying that Lucas, like, through the tournament, stuff like that. Like you said, it's kind of just, it's something that can happen. I think it's really easy to look at Gengar Mimikyu's attack and be like, this means my opponent can't do anything next turn. But that's just not how it works. You can still play the field, and which is exactly what you did, and it ended up winning you that top 4 game. So
yeah, I mean, it had been a long day. We were in round 16 at that point, and I mean, Lucas was probably tired as well as top of the whole stream thing. So definitely could, as you said, happen to anybody. So
for sure. Okay, well, top 4 finishes, and we end up actually having to wait a pretty good little while for the other top 4 match to finish. So you kind of have a second to figure out what those 2 decks are and kind of how you feel about it. So it's either going to be John Mastoy playing his Stall Doll deck, or it's going to be Colton playing his Vileplume Eggrow deck. So what were kind of your thoughts between those 2 decks? Which one were you hoping you were going to see in the finals?
So I thought I had a decent matchup versus both of them. I thought Eggrow was a little better. The Stall deck could potentially get weird with depending on Lugia shenanigans, Flare Grunt, or Pyroar. Because our list played Garb, we had an answer to both of them. Isaiah had ended up played both John and Colton throughout the tournament, and he was able to beat both of them. So I was pretty confident that our list could beat either or.
Sure.
So I was basically prepared for either, and I said whatever I hit, and ended up hitting Colton, and kind of just went from there.
All right, so walk us through that finals match.
Okay, so the strategy in this match is what you want to do is knock out the item lock plume. If you can, before evolving Garb, because if you evolve Garb, right, since we don't play Blower, you can never use Milotic again. So you only want to evolve Garb when you absolutely have to, because that way, like basically when you want to attack the basic locking plume. Because once you evolve Garb, like I said, you can't get your energies back. So if, for example, you evolve Garb too early and Colton was able to do some Flare Grunt shenanigans, I might have just lost because I didn't have energies left. So basically, you just want to have your board set up with a Ditto, with a tool, Wob, just in case they get the item lock plume and they Faba your tool on Ditto, you can send up Wob and then reattach the tool, retreat, pop Milotic, and then go Guzma, evolve the Garb again. So what you want to do is have Wob on board, the Ditto with Floatstone, Trevnor attacking, and basically just play the board. So if they have just an Eggrow or a basic locking plume, then you can just set up Garb, knock out the basic locking plume, and just lock their hand. If they go for item lock plume, I would try to take out the item lock plume as soon as possible so that you can reuse your VS Seekers. And other than that, I feel like the matchup is pretty straightforward. You just try to get the combo out, but make sure that your board can establish Garb when you need to.
Yeah, and you kind of like executed everything pretty perfectly in game 1. It seemed. And
yeah, I remember game 1 was a little bit sketchy because I think my opening hand had double Milotic and Garbodor. When I looked through my deck, I was just hoping Stretcher was not prized. Otherwise, the game would have been very sketchy. But thankfully, Stretcher wasn't prized. So I just committed to saying that I have to dig in the first 2 turns because I can Horror House him so he can't get the item lock plume out. So I have to dig. I have 2 turns to dig for the Stretcher, and hopefully I can get it. So I didn't get it the first turn, but I was able to Horror House, and then turn 2, I was able to reach enough, so to speak, and then found the Stretcher, and then from there the game was pretty smooth sailing.
Nice, yeah. So you're able to take that one down, and then game 2.
Yep. So game 2, I think Colton had a slower start than game 1. from what I can remember. But I remember that turn 1 I got the pop off, but I don't think I got Horror House. But I remember that I went via Seeker for Guzma with the Dene and my Lodic in hand, and then his turn 2, he went for basic blocking Plume instead of item lock Plume. And I remember people were asking why he didn't go for item lock Plume, but I think the reason he didn't go for item lock Plume was because he knew I had just via Secret for Guzma. So if he had went and stretch it for my Lodic. So if he had went for the item lock Plume, I could have just gone Guzma, pop my Melodic, attack with Trevnor, and just knocked it out. So he basically got no value out of his item lock Plume. So I think that's the reason he went for the basic blocking Plume. But from there, I was able to Guzma Oddish, set up my board, and basically stop the threat of the item lock Plume from coming up. And from there, I just set up my Trevnor and just kept attacking. I was able to draw a Via Seekers pretty well throughout that game, so I could move around his basic blocking Plume, because I prize Garb that game. I'm pretty sure, right? So that I couldn't attack his basic blocking Plume. And thankfully, Kotin didn't know I prized Garb, or there could have been at any point during the game where he could have just gone AZ and Eggrow, because I think there was a point in the game where he had just Plume and just Eggrow, and he could have AZ'd his Eggrow, and then it would have made the game very hard on me, because I would have either had to attack with Muck or attack with my Wobbuffet. And those aren't ideal because Kotin's list played Flare Grunt. So if I attack with Muck, Muck takes 4 energies. And if he just went Flare Grunt, then I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have enough energy to win the game. And if I attack with Wob, I have to attack with Wob at least, I think, 4 times before I can knock out the Plume. So it would have been a long time before I knocked out the Plume. And if his Plume had 3 energies on it, he can knock out my Wob before I can knock out his Plume.
Yeah.
So it would have been very hard. But thankfully, I was able just to take 3 prizes. And then I was able to 2-shot the Eggrow and thankfully win the tournament.
Yep, and so there it is. You find yourself the winner of another regional championship. I'm sure it's a humbling feeling, but a really exciting time as well. Especially as someone who's played the game as long as you have and been around for as long as you have. I'm sure it means a lot to you. So congratulations, Justin. You're one of the good guys in the game. So I'm always happy to see you do well. And yeah, so there's been a lot of discussion around this deck post-tournament. A lot of people, obviously it's very powerful. It's seen by, how well the 3 of you guys in day 2 did. Obviously you and Will made top 8. Isaiah lost his winning in, but was still in the top 16. What is your kind of opinion on where this deck sits currently in Expanded?
Okay, so I think that the deck is inherently broken. What I compare it to, it feels very similar to me, not exactly, but similar to the Zoro eggs of 2 years ago, where you could basically just lock your opponent out of the game either through Hex Maniac with the Zoro eggs or Muck, Ace Trainer, or Trevnor with this deck. And both decks have very similar engines. What they want to do is kind of just draw through their deck and then just set up this combo where, okay, once I get this set up, you can't play the game. And I think it's a very inherently powerful deck. And even the counters that supposedly stop it, they don't stop it. They just kind of slow it down. I don't think there's a hard counter to this deck. And if there is, I feel like you have to dedicate 10, almost double-digit slots to your deck. And then your deck is just inherently worse everywhere else, which is not good. So I think that I would say that I don't know if the deck is toxic or ban worthy, but it is very, very, very strong. And there are definitely combos that were not intended to be together. I don't think that Pokemon intended my Lotic and Trevenant and Dusknoir to be paired together, or execute and all the Quick Ball, Ultra Ball, Computer Search. So all these things all these old sets that go back, I think at least a decade at this point. Black and White was 2011?
Yeah. So we're coming up on it. Yeah.
All these combos, I don't think were intended to be together, but it just makes this deck inherently powerful and broken.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the things I saw brought up online is Melodic specifically says excluding Pokemon EX. So it was never intended to work with huge HP, basic 170 HP Pokemon that could hit hard. So why does it make sense that it works with 270 HP basic Pokemon that can hit really hard? I mean, obviously, there's a lot of moving pieces in the deck, and it's, like you said, a lot of games you end up drawing 30, 40 cards on the turns that you're pulling off the combo. So it's not necessarily, easy to pull off, but it, at the same time kind of is easy to pull off because, everything just works so well together. I know you said you didn't think the deck is ban worthy necessarily, but moving towards Charlotte, how do you think people should try to prepare for this?
I would say that the biggest things that give this deck trouble are pseudo is annoying but manageable. Wob is very hard for the deck to manage. If you are a deck that can go first and get Wob in the active without sacrificing your board position, right? Because a lot of decks can't get Wob into the active and get a good board position. So if you can get Wob into the active while keeping good board position, then I think those are the two things that could be make things difficult for the Trevenant Dusknoir. I wouldn't say it just outright wins it, but makes it difficult. Other things that could help are any deck that plays a Ranguru or stage 1 evolutions can play Hood, so that Garb doesn't shut it down. Which means like our list did not play Field Blower. I expect the list in the future to play Field Blower, but if people continue not to play Field Blower, a Hood on a Sylvally or an Octillery is very strong because you could still draw out of it even though we get the lock with the Garb. Other things that are very good against it are ADP decks, because if an ADP deck can go second, get the GX, and all they need after I get the Trevenant and Dusknoir is an energy. And then from there, they can basically set up their board. So, for example, the ADP Blounds deck that I beat round 9, that matchup is very scary because if they go second, get the GX, I get able to bench a Blound. If I get the combo, all they need is an energy, and then they attack me for 180 on turn 2 with Ultimate Ray. And then they can just put all their energies on Blound, and then they have this Blound that can basically knock out anything on my board, and if they knock out anything on my board, they get 4 prizes, and then I can't use a second Milotic. So anything with ADP is also very strong against this deck. I would say those are the biggest things that give Trevenant and Dusknoir trouble. Everything else I think is manageable. As long as you get the lock, really, there's not much the other decks can do because they can't play the game.
Yeah. Do you think that anything will be done about this deck before Charlotte, or do you think maybe after the next set comes out, anything will be done about it?
I think nothing before Charlotte, but if it dominates again at Charlotte, let's say like another 3 top 8s and it wins, I think that Pokemon might do something for Utah, because Utah's expanded, right?
Yes, it is.
Yes, so I think that might be something for Utah, but I think nothing will be done coming up to Charlotte. I think Pokemon will just see what happens, and if it dominates again like this, where it basically takes over the top 8, and if it wins the event again, I could see something potentially happening for Utah. And I think the thing that would get banned is probably Milotic.
Yeah.
Because like we said, Milotic wasn't intended to be paired with these GXs, and anything that is like you can blow it up and get 3 energies and attach it anywhere you want, and then activate Ace Trainer, I think is a pretty strong, almost too strong.
Yeah, I think without Milotic, the whole combo falls apart for sure, because that's what activates Ace Trainer, and that's what, puts your opponent to like the very low hand size. So, all right,
yeah,
Justin. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I know some people were talking about how if Milotic is banned, you can play like Magneton or something, and then play Max Elixirs and stuff. I was saying, like, if you do that, then you have to fit so many slots in the deck, because the deck only plays 6 energy, and if you're playing Max Elixir with 6 energy, I would never expect to hit an energy.
Nope.
Or then you have to play more energies, and then you have to take away some of the consistency cards, so then you can't expect to hit the lock. So I do think if Milotic's banned, the deck would not exist. When people were saying, oh, you could just play this, I don't think all those other combos would work.
Yeah, you'd have to play too many other like cards that just make the deck not as consistent. And if you what makes this deck more problematic is the fact that it does this, and it does it relatively consistently.
Yeah.
Like if this combo exists without Milotic, and you have to play things like Max Elixir, you're not going to be locking your opponent out of the game on like the second or third turn like you would be with this one. So, all right, Justin. Well, I really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on to do this interview. I've been loving getting to interview the regional champions throughout the season, so thanks for coming on to do it. If there's any shout-outs or any sort of plugs or anything you want to give, I always like to give people a chance to do that, so feel free, man. The floor is yours.
Okay, sure. I just want to shout out Will Jenkins, Isaiah Bradner, Kenny Britton, Kiana Meany, Justin Kulas, Michael Bergerac, Joao, and my brother Zach for testing. I feel like we've got a good group, and we've done a lot of good things this season, and I love those guys, and they're kind of like my Pokemon family, so to speak, and definitely grateful for them, and definitely would not have been doing this well without those guys. So I just wanted to give a massive thank you to those guys. Also shout out to my New York and New Jersey squad. my local players, and also my homies. I love those guys too. Meet up a lot during the weeks and when there's not events, and I just wanted to give a huge shout out to those guys. Also, everybody who sent me a congratulatory message or a thank you, I really do appreciate it. I just wanted to say thank you to all those guys. One of the things I love about this game is the community, and I just wanted to give a massive thank you to everybody. You guys make the game fun, and one of the reasons I came back in 2016. And I just wanted to say thank you to you, Chip, for having me on. Just wanted to give a big shout out to you. You've been doing some great things, and just wanted to give a shout out to you.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks once again for being here. Guys, if you enjoyed, definitely please be sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe to see more Pokemon TCG content. And thanks once again, Justin. We are going to get out of here, guys. Until next time, take care.